Morning, everybody, as you come online, and welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator. For those of you who have jumping on for the first time, my name is Mike Dixon, and I'm the Head of Sales and Marketing for AXR Recruitment and Search. And I've been recruiting for over 20 years. And my biggest frustration is seeing people's careers slow down and narrow before they should. Too many career conversations aren't as productive as they should be, and people's careers don't go as far as I think they should. And in the Sales Director Incubator, what we're going to do is discuss why this happens and help you, our current and also future leaders, to prepare to have better career conversations and to make better career decisions. And each session will learn about a different sales director's journey, how they've gained the experiences and skills to reach senior leadership. And we'll look at their successes, their failures, and the lessons learned along the way. Today's the fifth session, and we've now got over 250 people registered to the program, and a good number who jump online every couple of weeks, which is awesome. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Ben O'Brien, who's Director of Grocery Sales for Kellogg. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the invite and happy to be here.
Great. And Ben's journey, guys, we're going to explore has been with one company, with Kellogg's. But as we'll discover, he's taken on lots of different challenges, working in Australia, America, New Zealand, across a variety of different functions, including customer marketing, global trade, general management, and sales. Now, as always, guys, given the number of people on today's call, everyone is on mute. If you unmute yourself, that's always amusing, but we'll try and mute you again. Not that we don't want to hear from you, and please use the chat facility to fire in questions as we go. It'd be great to have those. And we've got a number of questions pre-submitted, which we'll get to as well at the end. So we'll hopefully leave a good 10 minutes for questions. So let's get into it. Ben, before we kind of get into your career journey, let's talk a little bit about life outside of work, and we've all been going through strange times. I think I've managed to avoid using the COVID word in the last couple of sessions, but I think it's challenged us all to live life a little bit differently. For you, is it giving you a bit more time to balance things and spend a bit more time on whether it's sports, hobbies, family, that kind of thing?
Yeah, look, it has. I mean, I guess balance is the right word. I've certainly appreciated spending more time with my kids. I've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. My 10-year-old has recently got into mountain bike riding and trail riding. So that's been really good to do that with him, especially over the weekends or on an early Friday afternoon or something like that. So that's been good. And being homebound more, I've got back into sort of cooking and more maybe barbecuing. Most of my team will know that I tend to spruik, what I smoked over the weekend with, so whether it's a brisket or ribs or whatever, a hobby I picked up when I was in the States. So yeah, I've done a lot more of that, which has been great.
Fantastic. I must admit, I love a good barbecue, mate. But I'm liking the smoking part of everything there as well. I'll be intrigued how that's going. And what about obviously we're here to talk about your career in sales and how you got to sales director and the pathway there. But
sure.
I'm always curious as to what the alternative might have been. For me, if I wasn't either so in love with recruitment or potentially an average golfer, I'd love to be on the tour making money playing golf. But is there another dream job or dream path for you to take?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't mind a game of golf, but I certainly wouldn't do that as a profession. But like, to be honest, when I left uni, actually, while I was still at uni, I was seriously contemplating going and doing a couple of seasons in the Northern Hemisphere ski resorts. I love skiing. I've been brought up snow skiing, spoiled at a young age to go to some great resorts around the world. So in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what, I could try and make a career out of this. Sure, my knees would be shot out by the time I was 45 at that stage, but that was the goal, was to go and work at a ski resort and either be part of the management team or actually teach skiing. So yeah, that was my side hustle, if you like, if I was able to get it up and running.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's jump back to then graduating 2001 for you, Ben, and obviously skiing was on your radar, but What else are you thinking about back then in terms of career and the pathway you wanted to go down?
Yeah, I think like a number of the folks that you've had on through the series, coming out of uni, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Actually, it was in my third year that I was pretty sure that I was going to go and have a gap year just to try to find out what I wanted to do. It wasn't until I hadn't graduated yet, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, look, I know someone at Kellogg's. They're recruiting for a sales rep on the Northern Beaches where I live in Sydney, and you should at least go and have a chat with them and have a coffee." And I did, and it led to me getting a role. They were looking to start a graduate program, and it was through their field sales team. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be one of four people to jump on board. Yeah, in 2000, just after I graduated in 2001, and yeah, started my career at Kellogg then. So it was really a chance with a family friend saying, "Hey, look, are you aware that Kellogg are recruiting, and this would be at least good to go and have a chat about." And so I guess I fell into it like many things, and in the back of my mind, I thought, well, this is good. I get a job straight out of uni. It was a seamless transition from graduating into being a rep, getting a car and getting a phone and getting a laptop, and you think that's fantastic, which it was, and then had aspirations to do other things after that. But yeah, that's sort of how I fell into it, which has obviously served me well.
Well, you give a young graduate a car and a phone and a salary, they're pretty happy, right?
That's right, exactly, absolutely.
Pretty much.
That's right.
Here we are, 19 years later, you're still there. What's kept you there?
Well, I think it's well, firstly the people. I mean, it's the old cliche that you've got to enjoy the people you work with, and I think that having grown up at Kellogg, I mean, being there 19 years, I've done a lot of growing up at Kellogg, growing up with a lot of similar people. I think that's first and foremost what keeps me at Kellogg. I think the other thing is just the variety of roles I've had available to me, and I think I'm sure we'll get into it a bit later, but being sort of focused on and getting into a role and saying, oh, okay, well, that's great. And what if I apply a different lens to it and apply a different role within the sales function as I go on? There's always been that opportunity every sort of 18, 24, 36 months. I mean, depending on the role. And so that's what's kept me there. I've always had a challenge of being well supported and being very fortunate in that, certainly early on in my career, that's helped me stay and yeah, be able to have a variety of roles.
Yeah, and there is a looking at your career, you've done lots of things, and as we said before, worked in different markets, which is fantastic. But how much of that pathway is you driving the opportunity? How much of it is Kellogg driving you?
Yeah, I would have thought that it probably changes over time. I think earlier on, I was lucky enough that I had a couple of mentors within the business that had been Kellogg veterans. I had people outside the industry. I had family friends. I mentioned they were in the FMC sector, and sort of helping me to guide. Oh, from a rep, have you thought about category management, and giving me a gentle nudge. But I think at the end of the day, it does come back up to the individual. Is that something that marries up with the short to medium term goals that you have? So I would say that earlier on, it was probably more of a push and me then realizing what I needed to unlock or be able to experience in order to get to a longer term goal. I think, it was not long after I joined Kellogg and had a head office role that I realized that I wanted to aspire to be a sales director. And so I really had it clear that it was, all right, I know that that's the role I want to be. What's the journey I need to get there? And so I think that in my gut and in my mind, I knew that if that was the role I wanted, then I was going to take on advice from folks that were going to say, hey, get broad experience across channels, get international experience, etc., in order to set me up for success. So I think having that guidance was definitely handy. But I think at the end of the day, because I had that drive and because I had that goal, it was definitely driven by myself as well. I would say that later on, as I've sort of progressed my career, it does become more and more on the individual, on myself, to be able to drive for that. But I'd say early on, like really being directionless as a young 20 something, coming into the industry, I really didn't know what I didn't know, and I was lucky enough to have some mentors to help me guide my way through.
Yeah, I mentioned your point you made there around quite early on. You decided that I think you said when you first worked in head office that
Yep.
senior director was your goal. That's That's interesting. You know, what was it? An individual doing the role, or was it the role itself? What was it that inspired you?
I think it was the individual. I really connected with our sales director at the time, and I'm sure there's many folks on the line that are ex-Kellogg employees that will remember our sales director from the early 2000s. And he was and still is, a very lively, energetic, classic sales director. You know, would make people walk through walls and convince them they could walk through walls. And I think that helped me to really aspire to be someone like him that people look towards, and was a true leader in terms of inspiring and energizing people. So yeah, it was absolutely, it started with the person, and huge amount of respect for the individual, but also what they were able to achieve and take us as a sales team on the journey. So yeah.
So who was that? Just to give them the full credit.
Mr. Tony Stoker.
I thought you were going to say, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, awesome guy. Which on that journey, Ben, which role would you say you've enjoyed the most?
Oh, look, I've had some really interesting roles. I've had some great learning roles. I'd say it's probably a toss up between the role I'm in now, because I think there's a sense of, great, I've had this longer term ambition to get to, where I am, and then there's the next journey too. But I think enjoying being back in Australia after being away for 6 years. So first and foremost, that makes this role a lot more fun, being back with a team that I know, and yes, there's been change since I've been away, but that's been great to be able to lead a team that I grew up with. But I would say the other role that had a huge impact was my Pringles role in the US. I absolutely loved working on that brand, and leading our sales teams to really drive our salty snacks growth in the US. It was so much fun, and I got to learn a lot. Whether it was trying to sell in a price rise to Walmart and the fun that comes with that, price pack architecture projects, and leading our sales team through that execution. There was a bunch of stuff that we were able to do, and loved the time there as well. I think that one definitely made a mark on me, and I think this one the role that I'm in now, I'm feeling the similar amount of energy that I had, back then. So yeah.
Cool. And pathways are never perfect. I think sometimes we set our hearts on roles and we don't get them, and it's like buying a house. Sometimes you sometimes it just passes you by. But ever been a role that you've gone for, you didn't get, and you kind of look back, think, oh, I wish I got that, and if any learnings from that?
Yeah, there was a role when I was in the States, actually. I mean, I was an expat, and so there were a lot of things that were going on with the expat assignment and the agreement that I was on. But I'd been asked to apply. I mean, I think part of it was ego and also a bit of flattery for someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I really want you to go for this role." And it was a role leading a customer team. It was based in Denver. I was like, hold on a second. I can now combine my love of working for Kellogg and my skiing. So, from a personal perspective, these things were starting to really come together. It didn't work out, and I was disappointed for a couple of reasons. But I look back on, it wasn't the right time for me to make that move. I'd only been in the US 18 months, and actually not even 18 months. It was probably shy of, probably just over a year. And yeah, it was too soon. And I think that the counseling that I got afterwards with my manager at the time was the right counseling. And you know what, 6 months later, I then moved into the Pringles role. So it worked out well in the end. But yeah, that was probably the only one that I say, geez, I wish that it was a sliding doors moment for sure.
Yeah, that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey Ben, we've asked each of the sales directors about the kind of difference between working operationally and working strategically, and if there's ever been a moment or time that your career you noticed that change. But for you, when could you identify that first opportunity that you thought, this is different? I'm operating at a strategic level now.
Yeah, I guess the first role that I took on that really demonstrated that change was leading the Woolworths business for Kellogg. And leading our largest customer. There were some challenges that we were having at the time, and being able to map out and really think about the strategic role of Woolworths within our business, not only within Australia but also the region. and being then therefore held accountable to try to map out that plan and then execute against that plan. And we ended up in a really great place at the end of that journey. It did take a couple of years, but it did make me shift from, selling in MPD and case deals and all those things that you do as an account manager, to really stepping up and being the lead, and then understanding what a true JVP looks like, and making sure that there was this holistic view and how Kellogg and Woolworths were going to move forward. So that was probably the first one. I think again, probably again shifting that scale, working on the Pringles business in the US was probably the other role that again made that shift even further. We had 130 odd customers that were sort of all lining into my team, and you couldn't be as operational as you like. You had to make sure that you had this strategic lens, and then also influence through others, and making sure that not only were my team able to go and work and engage with the customer teams, but also to make sure the customer teams were able to execute the plan. So I think, those two roles definitely helped me make the shift, and then it's sort of continued on from there. So
yeah. Interestingly, a lot of sales directors that I talk to, and including the people we've had in this program, have just talking about their career journey and their career path. Look at their next role as being general management, or being keen to explore the avenue of general management. Now you've done a general management role already, so you ran the deal business for Kellogg, which was really again an interesting step in your journey. Has that helped you in your current role as a sales director?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I think I certainly did. I underestimated going into New Zealand, and it can be quite operational, just with the size of our business there, and the team that we have on the ground. But it's tough. I mean, being fully responsible for the P&L and marketing spend, logistics, the sales team, obviously, it was a very different dynamic. And especially coming from the US and then into New Zealand, I did find the transition a little bit tougher than what I had expected. I think where I landed was in a much different place, and I think that's part of the journey, right? But no, definitely helped come into a role like this that I'm in now, because the scope is sort of narrower, as a sales director versus being a GM, and the scope's a lot broader. And having respect and working closer with, whether it's my CFO here, or whether it's having some fruitful conversation with our MD, and just having a bit more of a broader experience from the New Zealand lens, and understanding the intricacies of our business and some of the challenges that we have around making sure that everything lines up from net sales all the way down to operating profit. So that has helped me a lot, and hopefully, and I think what I'm hoping to do over this time is then to give my team that visibility. I think that having had that broader experience, I can then pass on, hey guys, have you thought about this, and the implication to that, and it becomes more of a stakeholder engagement, and cross-functional synergies start to then click in. So I mean, that's the goal, is to make sure that my team understands some of those aspects as well, by having that GM experience before coming back here.
Yeah, it's like the perfect broadening role, isn't it? Because we talk about broadening about being able to empathize and see things from others' perspectives, but as a general manager, you have to see it from all perspectives. So
yes,
it's fantastic. Another theme that we've touched on in the last 3 sessions has been diversity, and we looked at gender, but also explored other spaces too. And really pleased that what I've seen in terms of the transition in FMCG in the last few years, and testament is this program where over 40% of the people on the program are female, which is great. And I don't think that had been the case 5 years ago. But having worked in the States, having worked in New Zealand, and obviously being Australian, how do you think we're doing as a country relatively when it comes to I guess recognizing the power of diversity in running a business?
Look, I think we're getting there. I think our business in particular is very passionate about gender diversity and diversity of thought. Kellogg is very passionate about that, and I think most people will know that on our social platforms we do want to make sure we publicly announce that we're looking for gender diversity through our hiring process, but also in our capability building and bringing people up through our business. I think the diversity in the other two markets that I've worked in are slightly different. I mean, the US has a different slant on diversity. It's beyond just gender. It's definitely about ethnicity, and also there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into diversity within in our US business, but we do pride ourselves on being a diverse business globally, and I think that does mean slightly different things in each market. And New Zealand, similarly, I mean, we had and still have. I mean, most of the team is still there that I left earlier in the year. Very diverse, not only in terms of gender, which I believe is slightly ahead in terms of, if I look at the team, there's more females than males in the New Zealand team, but also diversity of ethnicity as well. And I think because particularly Auckland has a very diverse and very multicultural demographic that attracted, and from all parts of the world, right? Whether it's from UK, Europe, or even parts of Asia, the diversity in our New Zealand business is phenomenal, and that creates some really great platforms to be able to learn from, but also to be able to deploy in the market. And so I think applying and having lived through both those scenarios and then back to Australia, we've got some work to do. I'd say we're in a far better place than what we were when I left. And Esme, our managing director, and before that, Belinda, huge advocates of diversity of thought and diversity of gender within the Kellogg business in ANZ. And I think that continues to be a platform that we'll work on. I think we're at our leadership team is a 48 to 52% split at the moment. I think one person divides the difference in male to female at an ALT level. So that's something we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, I think that's probably better than most, Ben. It's one of the big themes again that we talk about through this program is the importance of broadening and how that's beneficial to the individual, but also to the organization in terms of performance. And a frustration I have, Ben, as a recruiter, however, is that often when I get a brief, we talk about the power of diversity, the power of broadening, and then when it comes to it, if I'm asked to recruit a business manager on Woolies, for instance, then I say, okay, let's understand what profile of person you're looking for, and it's, well, I want a business manager on Woolies from somewhere else. I'm like, well, that's not very diverse or broad, is it?
That's right.
What's in it for them, or indeed you? Why do you think that often is? I think we're still stuck in those safe decisions sometimes in the flow of recruitment.
Yeah, I think you probably wrapped that up perfectly in that last statement. Is I think that as a sales director, and if I had a role like a Woolworths or a Coles customer lead open, you'd want someone with experience in that role of the customer in particular, because it's about safety and a sense of continuity and making sure that you've got the right knowledge that you're importing into the business. But I think you raise a really good point is that some of the skills, I mean, the way that I view it is that if the technical skills are there, as in if you've led a customer and you say, all right, I've done a lot of work on Woolworths, but now I'm going to apply and bring someone in, for the Coles team, and just using that as an example, right? It's like, well, hold on a second. Yes, they operate differently. Yes, they're located differently, but the principles in terms of how you work with a customer, work with key stakeholders, apply, basic rules of the road and run and structure a JBP are the same. And so as long as we could sort of can unpeel those factors within an interview, I think that it shouldn't really matter. Now, I say that because it's easy to say, and I'm not recruiting for any of those roles at the moment, fortunately. But I think it does come down to making sure that those broader principles are in place, and that the candidate can demonstrate that in order to give the sales director confidence that person then can take on that role, whilst it might be a little bit different to their technical skill set.
Right. I look forward to our next conversation about recruitment, Ben.
Yeah.
Looking at your career path and support you have, and I guess how you prepare as well for your career journey. So you've made some really interesting moves. How do you kind of personally prepare yourself to have a development, a career conversation with your boss? So I guess if you are, you're talking to Esme, what preparation do you put in to get yourself ready for that conversation?
Yeah, look, I first go, I mean, we have a pretty robust IDP, individual development plan, process that helps to articulate, what are some of the strengths and opportunities that I'm either working on or trying to build upon. So I start there. I also then do a bit of self-reflection and get some feedback from my team and key stakeholders around leadership, and then work on, okay, well, here are my areas of opportunity. This role can give me obviously the skill sets to be able to do that. My goal is to still to do X, and so still having that longer term goal in mind, but then working through and trying to navigate, okay, well, if these are my areas of opportunity, what are some of the things that I know that I'm going to be able to tick the box in order to try to achieve that? And so it becomes quite high level at first, and then it's about drilling down and saying, okay, well, what's that timeline? What's the location? What would be those critical experiences? Is it emerging market? Is it a developed market? All those types of things do come into play. So, as well as at this stage anyway. So I think it's a broader point of view of, okay, well, what are the macro areas of opportunity or strengths that I can build on, and then linked with my longer term goal, and then trying to nut it out from there. And it is a bit of a journey. I've noticed that it's not just one conversation. It needs to be an ongoing development conversation. It's absolutely driven by me. Although my boss is pretty good at saying, hey, how are you going with your IDP? Let's catch up. There hasn't been too many prompts, but there's always that focus there to at least have an engaging conversation a few times a year. So yeah, broadly my prep is really around establishing. I think critical to that is getting stakeholder feedback as well.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting answer. Too often, I believe in talking to a lot of leaders in my network, there's a frustration that the career conversations they have with people are not well thought through. People will put more effort into. I think Jonathan Morley mentioned it in a couple of sessions ago. People will put more effort into far more effort into a business meeting than they would a meeting about their career. Um, which is stunning. But I think as you described there, structure and process, you're almost talking as if you're preparing for, a top to top or a big range review.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
really looking at it really thoroughly. What about mentors? Do you have a mentor or a group of mentors? Do you use mentors at all?
Yeah, I do. I have a mentor that I've had now, formally for the last 6 or so years, almost 7 years. We catch up once a month. It is all driven by myself. And his role has changed over that time as well. And our time zones are he's located in another part of the world. But yeah, I've had him consistently be a formal mentor. I think there's also the validity of having an informal mentor. There's people either that you've met throughout your career that you feel like you can rely on and that they've given you a steer. And funnily enough, and where you find these people can be either folks that you've worked with, folks that you've engaged with through networking, or in my case, one of the guys that I regularly talk to is actually an ex Woolies merch manager that I still keep in regular contact with, and I've seen his journey and also some of the leadership things that I aspire to that he's implemented within the businesses that he's been in, and being able to sort of chat to him as well. So yeah, diversity around leadership and mentors in that area has been probably a big influence in my career as well.
Right. And thinking about what's next for you, Ben. What is the career goal, and how do you think you're going to get there?
Well, I had you asked me this question, 5 years ago, I probably would have continued down the route of, no, definitely want to continue a GM path, and I think that seems to be quite common, certainly within sales directors. I think the taste that I had of that in New Zealand made me think slightly differently, and then coming back here and enjoying the role as much as I had in the first 6 or 7 months has been, again, another reflection point about really what do I want to do. And I think I'm really enjoying the highs and lows of sales, and whilst there are definitely highs and lows within GM in a GM role as well, I think where I'm at this point is continuing on a sales path, and that looks that can look very different depending on, where I end up over the next couple of years in my journey here. In our business, our largest market is in the US. We have a huge sales team over there, as you can imagine. And I think that being part of that team with a goal to lead our US sales business at some point in time would be something that would be extremely appealing to me. So that's probably the journey that I'm on at the moment, is continuing down the sales path and making sure that I can continue to add value. Really passionate about strategic selling and thought leadership and JVPs, and certainly enjoying that side of the work environment more than what I was, I guess, on the GM side.
Yeah. And can you do that role from Denver, Colorado?
I'll try. Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to advice but really interesting in terms of your career, Ben. But as everyone knows on the call, my biggest frustration is seeing people who don't realize their career potential. In your experience, Ben, why do you think some people's careers reflect their potential and others don't?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've observed, certainly over the last couple of years, and I have had this conversation more recently with some of the folks in our team, is having the whole package. So it's not just about performing in your role. It's absolutely about what your brand represents, and really understanding that you have a personal brand and how that's perceived by not only leadership within the business, but also your peers, is super important. And I think that those that only identify and say, oh, I did this job really, really well, and I grew sales, or I was able to achieve X, Y, and Z, and that was either at standard or above standard, it's only half the story. And I think those that probably get unstuck don't understand that it's the rest of the package that they bring. Are they able to engage key stakeholders? Are they able to collaborate well internally and externally? Do they have the polish to be able to then come into a C-suite and be able to present, whether that's externally, internally? So I think, my point of view and I look back at, folks that I've worked with over the last number of years, and the reason why they haven't realized that potential is because they haven't realized that there's actually more to it than just doing their job and doing their job really well. There's actually a broader picture that they need to be able to take into account. So yeah, that's my point of view, at least. Yeah.
No. And reflecting back when you're discussing how you prepare for your career conversations, there's a real structure you put into it, which I really enjoyed. And in my experience as a recruiter, every interview I have, every conversation I have with somebody is a career conversation. But there's very few people I meet who are really very clear in their goals. Their narrative is consequently quite weak. And I've got to spend a lot of time with people helping build that narrative, with them. Now you've got, I think, a real structured way in which you approach it. So how do you think, what would your advice be? How do you think somebody could build more clarity on their career goals and build a compelling narrative that actually enables them to communicate that effectively?
Yeah, I think firstly, it depends on what stage you are at in your career. If you're just starting out in the FMCG sector, for example, then what is your short to medium term goals really needs to be focused. Or even if you do have a longer term goal and that's going to take a number of years to get to, I think the first thing is to understand, well, what does that look like? What do I enjoy in my current role? What do I enjoy that I want to continue to work on? And then it sort of flows down from there. I mean, I think one of the guys I worked with in the US articulated really, really well, and he said that if you don't have that goal in mind, you'll continue to be directionless. And I think that's absolutely right. You've got to at least have some sort of goal, and it doesn't need to be, hey, 10 years down the track I want to do X. It can be even 1 or 2 roles ahead. And I think that's the other point, is that when candidates or when even folks in my team are thinking about, oh, I want to go for that role, you got to think about, well, that's great, but what's your next role? And is the role that you're going for going to set you up for the following role? At least think 2 roles ahead, and make sure that then you can you can make sure that you're making the right decision in that sense. So yeah, I think longer term thinking, think beyond just the role. Yes, it does become, there is flattery and a bit of ego when someone taps you on, or you get a call from, Mike Dixon to think about a role, and you're getting headhunted. I think that that can absolutely be great, and more often than not, those opportunities can be fully realized. But if it doesn't actually make sense for the next role, then you really need to consider what your long-term goal is.
Yeah, I like your point there around thinking more than one role ahead, because I think people fixate on that one position in front of them. And I get that, it's the most obvious thing to go for. But the longer your agenda can be, the further your horizon is, then the more diverse the pathway can be.
That's right.
And I think it's being able to map back, there's not just one path to a goal. If you look at 2 or 3 or 4 roles forward, actually there's lots of different ways to get there. And that's the whole purpose of these sessions, is to actually talk about how people have got to their sales director position through doing it differently every single time.
Yeah.
There's not one pathway. There just isn't.
That's right.
to get there. And what about you're recruiting? Maybe I have tapped a few people on the shoulder and I've sent you some great resumes. But what makes a candidate stand out for you? And it could be internal or external. You're reviewing a group of people, but what makes a candidate stand out through recruitment, and what can frustrate you as well equally?
I think humility is probably a big point. I admire humility, someone that can come in and honestly say, hey, I want to learn more about this role. I don't know enough. I want to ask a lot of questions. I think for someone that's self-aware. I remember having this interview a number of years ago, over 10 years ago, and I was helping another function out. It was for a demand planner, and this very, very qualified girl came in and to apply for the role, but she was completely unaware. And we asked a question around, hey, what would be the 1 or 2 things that your direct manager would say that you're doing well, and what are the 1 of the things that your manager would say that you need to improve on? Well, she didn't have an answer for the latter 2 at all. And I think that probably summarizes when I talk to someone, whether it is through an interview process, like, you know what, self-awareness is a big piece. It does tie into humility and being aware of, what your strengths and opportunities are, and being open about it, and being, on a path to be able to help build that. So I think as I've recruited over the years and asking those types of questions, getting a sense of what is the individual's awareness of themselves, of their shortcomings, but also their strengths.
Yeah, I share that frustration, Ben. It's a really interesting question to ask somebody. It's the old classic, what's your weaknesses? It's asked in a much more clever way often nowadays, but actually it's still, the nub of it is, can you show vulnerability? Are you able to reflect about what you're building on? Because that tells you a lot about the individual, and not everyone can do that. In fact, the majority struggle in that space. So still, I think it's getting better. In terms of I guess this whole concept of broadening again, and we've talked at every juncture about McKinsey's T career, where you've got functional specialization and experiential breadth, which make up the T. Why do you think a lot of people, when they are looking at their career path, only look upwards, only look at the roles up their function, and rarely look to breadth? And I think which is obviously the reason why people run up a function often too quickly, and then they struggle because they haven't got the breadth to be a really strong leader. Those who take the time to take broadening roles or are more effective leader. But in your experience, why do you think people just look upwards?
Look, I'm going to use the old cliche of it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that whilst we've got a number of really keen, driven folks within the industry, they do see that, it is about getting ahead and getting that pay rise and be able to get to the next level. And I think there's, again, ego plays a little bit of a role there. But I just think that, most folks don't understand the breadth of the role, or at least the understanding that's required as you start to move up within an org structure, is that there is a requirement for you to have at least a basic understanding of certain topics, to be able to, help lead your team. And it becomes more around leadership. The further you come up, it's less about the technical side of things, but you do need to have a knowledge of some of the technical stuff in order to help, guide your team and direct them in the right way. So I think, maybe it's folks that don't understand that's required at that level, and therefore just think, oh, well, yeah, no, I can lead a team and I can go off and do X, Y, and Z. I think for those that certainly I speak to need to get a broader understanding of, it is about getting broader bits and pieces in part of your knowledge bank so that then you can be even stronger and be able to lead a team through that. And I just don't think that it's recognized. It is all about, hey, I've got personal pressures, I've got cost pressures. I do want to get that bump because I'm looking for, the salary, but also the prestige of the role and the title, which is a little short-sighted in my opinion. And I think you probably share the same view.
Yeah, completely. To me, I absolutely get it. I think sometimes, that extra uplift in the salary is critical, particularly at the more junior level of your career. $10,000 can be a lot of money. It's not a small
Absolutely.
money,
Yeah.
but it pales in significance if it limits your career earnings, which it can do. Thinking it from a sales perspective, and as a senior sales leader, Ben, what are the broadening experiences that you like to see in someone who's developing as a potential sales director? Somebody who you think actually they've got they're doing the right thing, they're choosing the right experiences. What do you think those would be?
Yeah, I think first and foremost that the team that they're either participating in or that they're leading, that they're able to add value beyond just their core function. So are they doing the right role in terms of looking after their team and the team that surrounds them, and being able to add to their career journey as well, or their learning agenda? I think beyond that, it's those that are hungry to take on some new assignments that might be a little bit outside their comfort zone, because the role or the next role might not be able to give them that experience. However, they're hungry enough and they're open to taking on roles that there might be an organizational challenge, or that there could be something around a cultural shift that the business might be looking at. Those that are putting their hands up, or those that are suggesting, hey, could we look at doing those, I think are certainly thinking about it in the right way. We've got a couple of examples where I've got a few folks that are doing that, and I'm really encouraged to see their broader learning agenda and how the dialogue is changing as they're having more and more of those experiences with cross-functional partners, whether it's in supply chain or finance or marketing or HR. My team are certainly having some more meaningful conversations that actually broaden their experience. So those people that are looking for those things, I think, are setting themselves up right to be able to continue on that learning journey. So,
do you think some people don't stick their hand up because they worry that their line manager might feel a bit betrayed? They want to get involved in other things. Because conversely, as a leader, I imagine that when people stick their hands up, it's fantastic. It's what you look for. But I wonder whether there's a bit of a kind of betrayal kind of concept going on there.
Yeah, potentially. I think that it's probably more about that individual having that conversation though with their manager and being really open and saying, hey, look, I have these aspirations. I think that I can still do a great job in what you're asking me to do, but I feel like that in order to get ahead, that I really want to take on this project or be part of this team that's taking on this project. If you're having that transparent conversation, in my experience, the manager is more than happy to support the individual. And so, yeah, I think it's just about having that open and honest conversation. It should be part of your career conversation anyway.
Yes, exactly. So the advice is stick your hand up, have the conversation. Don't hold back. Yeah. Great. We've talked about the leading attribute of a sales director in the last couple of sessions from the poll and survey we did, which is connecting people to a vision. That was by far away the most important thing that everyone was looking for in a sales director. From a Kellogg point of view, what does Kellogg do to connect people to the vision of your business, and what role do you play in that?
Yeah, so two parts to that, I guess. Firstly, we understand, what some of the drivers are around why people come to work. And so how do you tap into that ongoing motivation of why people are connected into the business and what they're passionate about? We've got some great, very passionate people about our brands. And so how do we tap into that to then talk about what our longer term vision is, so that you're creating this emotional connection? So I think we've done a pretty good job as we communicate our strategy, and we have this sort of rolling 3-year strat that we communicate with the broader team. annually that we, this year it had to be all virtual, but, in years gone by, we go off to a big venue and really make sure that there's a big amp up around our growth drivers and what we see as our challenges, but what we're going to do about it to be able to, a course correct or amend or continue to, depending on the category, depending on, what the situation is, in order to address those core concerns, and then linking it back to this sort of emotional connection. So I think that's one thing that Kellogg has done well over a number of years. My experience in the States was that they would go over the top and just classic, and trying to bring some of that back has been interesting because of the cultural dynamics, but the fundamentals are the same. Is how do you connect emotionally to folks around, a common purpose or a goal that people can really get behind. What role do I play? Look, as the sales lead, a big role. I've got to make sure that my guys and our troops on the ground are all singing the same tune and are out there and working with our customers and being able to execute that strategy. So I mentioned, my early aspiring sales director who did that well. I can only hope that I can be a fraction of what he was able to do around really inspiring the field team, really inspiring our field sales people to be able to do the same, and then how that cascades through our customer teams and so on is super important. So it's sometimes you have to sort of get up and get that extra bit going as a sales lead, because you've got a lot of troops out there that need to be able to execute the plan.
Yeah. And other than the infamous Tony Stoker, what other leaders have you seen who do a great job with that? And it could be anywhere outside of Kellogg.
Yeah. Look, I started following a number of folks on LinkedIn a number of years ago. Indra Nooyi, the previous CEO of PepsiCo, I think can be quite inspiring. She's very active on LinkedIn as the CEO, and announced that she's moved on and doing other roles. She still provides inspiration around leadership and also diversity, which is important to her career journey as well. I think that, still looking at and reading, I learn a lot from actually the All Blacks. And even though it pains me to say it as an even more diehard Wallaby supporter than I was before I left the country, the All Blacks and their coaching methods and what Graham Henry and then Steve Hansen had as part of their legacy. And anyone that wants to read the story, there's a book called Legacy by last name Kerr. I can't remember his first name, but Legacy. It's a great book, and it really talks about the heritage of the All Blacks and what they try to breed as in part of the culture. And so I think that having some of those, experiences and identifying some of those folks around what sort of what do they want the teams to be, whether it's a sporting team, whether it's a corporation, are people that I follow and that I take inspiration from and try to steal with pride some ideas along the way.
It's a great book. It's one of my favorite leadership books, actually. But and what about advice to you? What's the best piece of advice anyone's given you, Ben?
Look, I think probably more recently, and I'd say in the last couple of years, one of my peers said to me, and it sort of came from nowhere. It was one of those pieces that, and I've since talked to her about it. She said, just remember, it's progress over perfection. And, when you've been in certain roles and hey, this is where we want to get to, and you sort of feel disappointed that you haven't got, whether it's culture or whether it's process or whatever it might be that you're working on, and it's not quite where you thought it was we're going to be by the time you thought it was, but that you've made that progress. That's what you need to be proud of. And I think that's helped me a lot in my journey, is knowing that it's about progress over perfection sometimes, and to make sure that you continue to, I'll use another US term, but move the puck forward. I think that's important, that as you're in your role, are you able to leave it in better condition than what you inherited? And I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I've had in recent years.
Fantastic. So we'll finish up before we go into open Q&A, as we do in every session, with what 3 pieces of advice would you give an aspiring sales director?
Look, I think be patient. I think making sure that you do get those critical experiences so that you can set yourself up, but also your team up for success. underestimate the power of that. I think what captured me, Mike, when you first, I first spoke about this session was really about this T model. And I think that is absolutely critical to any aspiring sales director to really take on board, is how do they try to build their skill sets accordingly to ensure that, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that's probably the first thing. I think also make sure that, one other piece of advice I had was, which I think is like probably a Steve Jobs thing as well. But, again, when you're in the US, people love to give you advice and they usually try to steal from other folks as well. But, is try not to be the smartest person in the room. Surround yourself with really knowledgeable people. And how do you then collate that together and make sure that there's a high functioning team to be able to work together productively, and then play off each other's strengths and compensate for each other's opportunities. So I'd say that's the second piece, is try not to be the smartest person in the room. And the third is have fun. Sales can be tough, and in concentrated environments like New Zealand and Australia, for grocery at least, it can be tough, but you've got to be able to, take your head up and have a bit of fun and enjoy the experience. Take a step back and enjoy the experience, because it won't be forever, and you're going to have highs and lows. But knowing that that there's a bit of a fun and journey along the way, I think is critical. So yeah, they're my 3 pieces of advice.
Thanks, Ben. Great. Let's open up now. So, guys, feel free to put some questions in the chat. There's one come through, but ask Ben anything. Well, almost anything, I think. But so, from James Daniel, Ben, what tips would you give someone looking to develop their strategic thinking?
Oh, that's a great question. Look, I think there's a number of processes, and I'm a big advocate of Square and understanding problem solving and the process to getting to a strategy. So I think first and foremost is, in understanding a strategy, is what's the problem you're trying to solve for, or what's your end goal. There's a number of models that I could quote. OGSM helps you to get there, but locally, I'll give a plug to my good friend Matt Zanello, who runs a great process-driven. And I'm sure many of the folks on the call will know Square process, but that has helped me a number of times to be able to articulate a strategy.
Okay, great. As a sales director, what learning and development do you get, and what's the best program or session you've been on?
Oh, well, it's mainly driven by myself at the moment. It is really, my manager does nudge me in this area, but it does really drive, it is driven by myself. Look, at the moment, being new back to the business, there's my mentor helps me a lot, and so he acts more of a coach at this point in time. He does flex his style, and I know that executive coaches are quite common for those that are new to leadership positions. I don't have a coach. I don't. There hasn't been a discussion about needing a coach, but I have a mentor that acts like a coach. So it's almost like I've got that on call, and someone that knows me quite well. So look, I think in terms of the most influential course that I've been on in the last couple of years, I'd say that situational leadership, and identifying that not every situation is the same, and nor are people the same, that you do need to be able to take a different tone to how you address certain situations, whether it's up the pole, down the pole, out of the business, inside the business, and different characters with that. I'd say that the most influential course, or at least structured pieces, around situational leadership.
Okay, great. What's the first thing you do when you suffer a setback?
Look, take a step back, and I probably go into the mode of, okay, what would I have done differently? And then realize that, okay, we could not, or we could have planned for that to happen. But take a step back and say, okay, well, now that I've learned from that, how will I, if I'm faced with that same situation again, what will I apply differently to that situation? So I think it's always, yes, you're always going to get disappointed, and frustration probably is the first thing that would come to mind in my experience. But you've got to be able to remove yourself from that and be able to say, okay, well, what have I learned through that process? What would I do differently? How will I apply that again? And actually take notes on it, because I think the biggest thing that we lose, and something that I'm talking to my team a lot about at the moment, is creating a playbook. So whether it's, hey, I've got to take a price rise, and so what's the playbook to do that in this environment, or whether it's hey, we've got a learning or capability agenda, and how do we make sure that we're holding some of those true? So I think making notes of what happened, what you would do differently, are critically important to that process too.
Another from the chat. While things are changing, why do you think there appears to be a lot more females at the mid-level sales roles, NAM, etc., but less at the director level?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think it's about hitting a ceiling at all. I think that probably would be a perception of some was, okay, is that the ceiling? I think that in my experience, we've got a lot of ambitious females within our team who have the ability to get there. I don't think I'm going to distinguish between whether it's a male or female, but it's about being open to those broader based roles and ensuring that you're able to do that, whether it's with your personal commitments or professional commitments. I guess that's probably my only view on that one of why there isn't. We have a really strong focus of ensuring that through the org that we have good capability planning cross gender, and so it is really, regardless of whether you're male or female, it is making sure that you get that broad-based learning experience.
Yeah, my personal view would be, I think the trend is getting better, and I think for me the main reason is that the role has changed. I think the actual role of sales on FMCG was quite traditional a few years ago. Was really kind of quite ego driven, and the kind of bigger your the bigger your ego often meant the further you could go, the bigger your personality. Whereas now it's a lot more complex. There's many more parts to it, and I think it plays to a lot more personality types. Therefore, the diversity of thought required and background to be successful in the profession is much wider, and I think that appeals to females as well as males, but also people of all diverse backgrounds. So I think we are getting there, and I think that will play out. I would imagine there's more, certainly I haven't done the numbers, but there's more female sales leaders now than there was 5 years ago and 10 years ago at director level. And I think in 5 years' time, that will get better. I don't know how long it'll be before we see complete equality, but it's good that the trend is going the right direction.
No, I agree. And I'm succeeding, there's been 2 sales directors prior to me coming in that were both female as well. So I think that, certainly within our business, we've been able to unlock some of those, potential stereotypes too.
Yeah, great. I think we've probably got time for maybe one more question before we wrap up, but and it's a curly one. How do you deal with internal conflict between sales managers?
You mean playing referee? Look, that's a great question. This is something I spoke about with my mentor not that long ago, actually. And I think it comes down to the situation and what's at stake, and are the key stakeholders taking, the whole chessboard into play as we look for whether it's, customer exclusive opportunities, or whether it's a debate around price points or a debate around talent. I mean, all those things come up. I think that depending on what the impact is to the broader org will then mean that I will lean one way or the other, and I have to take a balanced view. I have to be conscious of the individual that's stating, or the individuals that are stating the arguments also. I don't think there's one answer to that. Again, it comes down to the situation and the topic that you're debating or trying to referee.
Yeah, that's a very balanced answer, Ben. Awesome. Thanks, mate. Appreciate your time and sharing your career journey. That was really, really interesting. I think another example of how you can get to top doing it differently, and for you it's staying in one business but really embracing a lot of different opportunities and taking your family on a world tour whilst you've done it, which is great, and you might get back to Denver, you never know, or to Denver. And I hope for those on the call and for those who listen to the recording, that's just giving you more examples of how to think about your career path, how to prepare yourself for career conversations and build your narrative so that your decision making is always improving. That's the entire purpose of the Sales Director Incubator. And And those decisions will pay off not just for the role that you're looking at, but with that wider horizon for all of your career, which will maximize your potential and your career satisfaction and earnings as well. So in finishing, I look forward to seeing you all in the next and sixth and final session of season 1, which is in 2 weeks, with Eugene Visioni, head of sales and marketing for Birch and Waite. Birch and Waite, a small but fast growth Australian-owned business. A really interesting journey, and Eugene's been part of that story. We're then going to pause and take a short break before starting season 2. We've got another 6 sessions lined up, which will take us through to Christmas. Such as the demand from the sales director community wanting to give back. I'm really pleased with the 6 we've got lined up. So guys, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Ben, that's been brilliant, and have a great Thursday, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks.